been talking such great detail about, we all are going through this overwhelming time in our lives. And in your book, Resilience from the Heart, you reveal that we are at a tipping point and that humans, have a history of embracing change. So can you give us, like more details about how we can move from the survival mode to the thriving mode, especially in the times right now?
The book, Resilience from the Heart, was originally titled The Turning Point. And my publisher, after 1 year, after the hardback, the publisher changed the title. So there are two books with almost identical content, but different titles. And I want people to know that so they don't need both books. Resilience from the Heart had a new focus of new discoveries of the human heart and the role that the heart has in our resilience. And so it is a different kind of book. But they both talk about the fact, and we're living this fact right now. Almost universally, ancient texts and traditions have always told us that in our lifetimes, we would live a time of convergence that is rarely recognized in modern science. Modern science, I'm a degree geologist. Earth science tends to look at vast expanses of time. I mean, eons of time. So climate change, for example, to an earth scientist, when you're talking about 8 or 10 years, in Mother Nature's time, that's nothing. So we tend to look at things very, very differently, whereas a lot of science today are looking, only at the moment, and then they've lost the context. So the context is that we are living a rare convergence of natural rhythms and cycles that we've never seen in 5,000 years of recorded human history, that is turning our way of life and lifestyles upside down. We are living a natural rhythm of climate change. If there were no humans on the earth, the geologic records tell us the climate was still changing and we are within the parameters of that change. However, I got to be really clear about this. We definitely need to stop burning fossil fuels. We need to go clean, green, sustainable. And here's the point. We've had the technology to do that for over 70 years. We've had the technology to create electricity, burning zero fossil fuels, no greenhouse gases, inexpensively with materials that are abundant and cannot be weaponized and cannot melt down like a nuclear reactor. And because we haven't brought it forward, it tells me the powers that be are not serious about creating this clean, green, sustainable environment. So I just had to say that. So,
well, thank you.
But climate, and so we are contributing to climate change, and we need to stop that. But we are not the cause. Clearly, we're not the cause. In and of itself, that would be enough to change the way we live, how we grow our food, where we live, how we migrate, our industries. But at the same time, we are also living a rare cycle of innovation and economic. When I say economic conditions, it doesn't mean money. Economies can involve money, but they don't have to. There are many successful economies in the world today where people use no money, but they have everything they need. At its deepest sense, economies are about human relationships, about us, and the ability to share the vital resources that we need every day in our lives: water, food, energy, medicine. Sometimes money is involved, sometimes it's not. But we are living the collapse of an economic cycle, the end of an innovation cycle. And any economists that are watching this, they will know what the Schumpeter cycle is. We don't hear about it, but that is one. The Kondratiev cycle, the K-wave, is another one, very well known in some circles. That's enough to change the way we live. The third cycle that we're living, rarely do we hear about, is a cycle of human conflict. Human conflict is directly linked to magnetic fields of the earth and the sun. This is very well known in scientific literature. Social coherence and personal coherence is directly linked to the, and I'll just give you the bottom line. The formula is when the magnetic fields are low, humans are more aggressive, less willing to cooperate to solve their problems. When they're high, all of that's reversed. 2020 was the lowest point in the magnetic field. If you're following solar cycles, you know that solar cycle 24 ended. So that means no magnetic fields on the sun right now that influence the earth. 25 has yet to begun. We haven't entered officially into solar cycle 25. We're in this in-between point that affects climates, that brings cooler temperatures, that affects social cohesion. It's a perfect convergence. Some people call it a perfect storm. I look at it as a window of opportunity, and I'll tell you why. Because when these three cycles converge, it disrupts everything that we have come to trust and rely upon in our lives. And it brings up, the world changed. So when we try to solve our problems, live our lives, and do the same things that we've always done in a new environment, the things that are not true, that are not sustainable, cannot work. And that's where we are right now. What is the only things that are breaking down are the unsustainable ways of thinking and living. And there are a lot of them. And that's up for us right now. If we have the wisdom to recognize this, my dear colleague, my spiritual brother and friend, Bruce Lipton, and I were invited to speak at the United Nations in New York just before all of these changes began. And they asked us, what do you see unfolding over the next 15 years? They wanted to know where they should put a focus and resources and funding and how they could prepare to help do what the UN does when they're helping, all these populations. And we shared this, and they were amazed. They said, why have we never heard about the cycles of conflict? And it's because we're not taught this stuff in mainstream education, but it is based upon peer-reviewed, rock-solid science. It's not my theory or my hypothesis. I'm just a scientist, and I stay current with the scientific literature. So the beauty of this time, and especially with a human conflict, we are vulnerable and susceptible to conflict if we don't know where we are in the cycle. If we do know, it's the greatest opportunity for peace. Because when we understand our vulnerability, it's the opportunity to become very good listeners and listen to the people that we don't agree with, whether it's leaders of nations or whether it's your husband or your wife or your partner. We're all affected the same way. To listen and give them the benefit of the doubt and listen to what they're saying rather than trying to figure out the answer in our mind before they even finish what the conversation is all about. We all have a tendency to do that sometimes. We're calculating our response while the conversation is still happening. So it's an opportunity to be a good listener, to extend the benefit of the doubt, the olive branch of peace. And if you look at the cycles, and I've talked about them in the books, at the peaks and the valleys of conflict cycles are when the ends to the great wars have happened. World War I, World War II, Korean War, all happened right at the end of these cycles. So we are in a vulnerable and susceptible time because the glue, if you will, that has held these patterns in place is dissolving. And in the dissolving of that glue, everything is up for grabs. And if we recognize that, this is the opportunity, this is when new ideas are embraced quickly. One person can offer an idea that turns this planet in a beautiful, positive direction that will be embraced. Whereas when everything is set and the magnetic fields are strong, ideas are very entrenched. It's hard to get those new ideas across. But we're in a time now, new ideas are being embraced, new technologies are being embraced. Everybody knows something is up. So it's an opportunity. Once you step back, and I do this with live audiences, I did it at the UN. When you step back and you look at the big picture and you see climate, and you can't argue with the cycles because they're in the ice cores, you can see it clearly. You see conflict, you see innovation and economy all converging. You say, my God, no wonder things look crazy. I'm surprised it's not crazier than it is. and here's the beauty. It doesn't last for a long time. It is intense and it's brief. And this is the point, because the choices that we make right now determine what happens on the other side of this convergence. And this, I'm going to bring it full circle. This is where our opportunity to embrace the power of beauty on a biological level, on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, on a psychological level, on an economic level, on a scientific level. When we can bring that front and center and include the power of beauty as a fundamental value, just like life is a fundamental value. Freedom is a fundamental value. Community, creativity, beauty. These, I personally believe, from the people I've talked to in nations, I've been on every continent of the earth, not every nation, but every continent. We cherish and we value these. If they can become the cornerstone of the communities and societies and the nations that we move forward with, I think we're going to be happier as a global community. I think we'll be more peaceful as a global community. And it's an opportunity that only happens once every 5,000 years or so. So that was a long answer to a short question, but I covered a lot of ground in there, I know.
No, that was awesome. It kind of feels like the next question of a heart-brain connection and why the coherence technique is so valuable. Could you quickly touch base on that?
Sure. So as a geologist, what I have known since my time, I was in school back in the 1950s, 60s, early 70s is when I was in school. And what I was learning about the magnetic fields of the earth then still applies today, is that we are deeply influenced, biological systems are deeply influenced by the magnetic fields of the earth. And when they change, we respond to those changes. But it was only in 1991 that neuroscientists discovered essentially neurons, what are called sensory neurites in the human heart. And this is a big deal because they are brain-like cells, but they're not in the human brain. They're in the heart. They form a neural network. They think independently of the brain. They feel, they sense, they remember independently of the human brain. So knowing that opens the door to a lot of possibilities in terms of behavioral science and our emotional experiences. But what the science discovered by taking this new information and looking at ancient and indigenous spiritual practices, what they found was that some of, not all, but some of the techniques used by shamans and yogis and mystics and monks and nuns and healers and curanderos made use of the neurons in the heart and the brain by harmonizing the heart and the brain, two organs harmonized into one system in the body, into one potent neural network in the body. And the only way to optimize that, well, let me say it this way, the optimal coherence between the heart and the brain is what this is called, is a very low frequency, 0.1 hertz. 0.1 hertz is the fundamental frequency of what is called the magnetic field line resonance frequencies. I don't want to be technical, but that's what it is, of the earth. So here's the bottom line, just to make it very simple. When we harmonize the heart and the brain in our bodies, we bring our body into alignment and the systems of our bodies into alignment. It goes beyond the heart and the brain. The heart and the brain are the catalysts. When they are harmonized, now we have brought our immune system into harmony. Our longevity enzymes are awakened and released. Our resilience to change is enhanced. The doorway to deep states of intuition, when we harmonize the heart and the brain, now what we know is the harmony extends beyond our bodies and actually brings us into alignment with the planet with this 0.1 hertz is the fundamental, it's the first spike. I didn't know I didn't bring a chart here. But if you look in the books, the first spike when you see what are called the magnetic field line resonance frequencies of the planet is exactly the frequency that harmonizes the heart and the brain, 0.1 hertz. It's also the frequency that whales communicate with in the ocean because it is such a fundamental frequency. It's also the frequency military submarines use because it is such a fundamental frequency. It harmonizes with the earth. So when through our either technical or spiritual practices, however people want to approach this, when we learn to harmonize the heart and the brain, we harmonize the systems, we optimize the systems in our body. It's like saying to your body, all systems are go. And with that, now, what do you want to do with that optimized system? So I share these techniques, everything, all of my programs and the books write about the techniques. The Institute of HeartMath in Northern California perfected in the laboratory the techniques and reduced them down to 3 very simple steps. And with their permission, I share those as an independent author. We work together. I've worked with them for over a quarter of a century now. We tour together, write together, do webinars together. We do fundraisers together, and they're really good people. So I would encourage, if there are any of our viewers who are not familiar with what I'm saying, you can certainly find it in my books. But if you go to the website, HeartMath, HeartMath, capital MATH.org. It's all one word, HeartMath, and then .org. There's the science, the techniques, the communities that you can become a part of. But I think this is one of the most powerful things that we can do for ourselves right now. Because when we harmonize the heart and the brain in the presence of the chaos of the world, what we're doing is we're relieving stress on a genetic level, literally on the level of DNA, on a cellular level, on an organ and tissue level, on a respiratory level, on a cardio level. And sometimes that stress we're not even aware of. It's easy to recognize stress in a tough relationship, or in a difficult job, or if you're on the 680 freeway in San Francisco, commuting in the city, or any freeway, I guess, anywhere now. But there are levels of stress that we don't always recognize. When we drink water that is full of chemicals and impurities, our body has to work to balance those out and change the pH. That's stress to the body. When we eat foods that are cooked in rancid oils, for example, that change the way that food functions in our bodies. I'm not going to say it's right, wrong, good, or bad. I'm going to say it taxes the body in a way that creates stress. And we don't always know that. So this harmonization of the heart and the brain, it works this fundamental level to relieve that stress, enhance the immune response. Who doesn't want that in a global pandemic? The longevity enzymes, it's not just about living longer, but if you're living longer, it means you're healing and you're rejuvenating and you're regenerating. And who doesn't want that? It gives us greater resilience to change. Man, who knows what tomorrow is going to look like? I'm being asked to book events into the year 2023. I can't do it. I said, how do I know what 2023 is going to look like? We don't know. Resilience to the changes in our lives, because harmonizing the heart and the brain actually improves what is called heart rate variability, HRV. So there's very fundamental biological and physiological results and principles from this, and much more than we can do justice to in this brief program. But it is a technique that has been known and used by people who weren't scientists for a very long time. And now the scientific community has recognized the neurons and the relationship. And they said, okay, those are there. What do we do with them? And they recognize that the indigenous people have been telling us what to do with them without knowing that they were there for a very long time. And that goes back to what we said earlier. I think life is simple, nature is simple, until we make it complex. We don't have to know the nuts and bolts to benefit from these. If our left brain wants to know the nuts and bolts, that information is out there. So,
wow, thank you so much. I've actually learned a lot from. I love the science part myself, so thank you, and I appreciate it all.
Well, I do as well for this reason. I am a scientist. I'm also, I'm not a religious man, but I'm a deeply spiritual man, in the sense that spirituality is about us and our relationship to the world, our relationship to nature, to one another, to ourselves. And I think we are all spiritual in that respect. But what I found you probably remember this, back in 1980s, when the New Thought community was emerging, there was stuff all over the place that people were relying upon for their health and healing. Some of that stuff was based on things that are true and it helped them. Some of that stuff was based on principles that were absolutely not true. And I have friends that are no longer in this world because they believed those things so much to the last breath they had on the planet, but it was based in principles that had no foundation. So the science helps me to, let's just do it. Let's be honest. How can we heal if we're not honest with ourselves about our healing, whether it's societies or whether it's our body? So let's find out what works, what doesn't. What does work, let's do more of it. What doesn't work, cool. You know, it's out there, but maybe it's just not for us. And I think it's that clear. So the science, and this is one of the places where science is catching up, because some of those new thought principles were telling us things that science was not telling us back in the 80s about our relationship between emotions and DNA. Science says, how can a feeling change your genes? You're stuck with what you have from your parents. Well, you're stuck with what your parents gave to you when you're born. But now we know epigenetics, the science of epigenetics. So the external and the internal environment change those genes respond to the environment. We're made to do that. So if you don't like what your parents gave to you, we have the opportunity to modify, upregulate, downregulate. And we're just learning about that. That was a new thought principle that was right on, that science didn't acknowledge. So that was in that way. Then there were other principles that the new thought community was putting forth that we know actually are damaging. I mean, we could go through a whole program on those. And so that's why I think we owe it to ourselves to do our due diligence and to honor ourselves by understanding. But don't take somebody else's word for it. Don't take my word for it. We owe it to ourselves to find out who we are, what our relationship to our body and what our relationship to the world is. And then if we choose to optimize that in new and exciting ways. And that's a new frontier right there.
Well, Greg, this is such valuable information, and we really appreciate you coming on our show, and I'm so excited to share it with everybody. And I appreciate your dedication to, you've done so much research, but your dedication to serve is for me such an important message to everybody. And so I'm very, very grateful.
Well, thank you, Becky and Carol. Thank you both very much for sharing a part of your day with me today. I've enjoyed this. I just now looked at my clock and I'm amazed the time went by it seemed to me like it went by very quickly. I don't know if it did to you or not.
It did.
But that's good. We don't want our time together to drag. That's not fun. So thank you for this. Thank you for the summit and for your vision, your dedication. I know of no other summit based upon beauty.